Well, hello. That was just a brief little introduction. I came out here to do two things. I'm going to do a little book review here, and then I'm also going to go shooting afterwards. And this is where I like to go shooting, so I came out here and I thought I'd do both. The book I'd like to review is The Cleanest Race by B.R. Myers. This is a book about the ideology of North Korea, and this book I became aware of this book by watching the Michael Malice's presentation at Porcfest. Now, I didn't actually watch it at Porcfest because it was going on at the same time as the Austrian versus Chicago debate, but it was recorded, and just maybe a week or two ago, it was uploaded, and if I can find it, I'll go ahead and put it in the description, and he recommended this book, and so I went ahead and bought it, and I'll say a couple things real quick. A, it's relatively short. There's a lot of pictures. The type is relatively large with huge margins. I don't know if you see, yeah, look at these very large margins. Pretty large type. So, it took me 2 sittings basically to read this book, or 2 days really. So it's not a really daunting read or anything that you have to invest a lot of time in. I will also say that if you go onto YouTube and you type B.R. Myers, that's M-Y-E-R-S, you can see a couple of lectures of his. And the best one is not on YouTube, but if you go and Google and just type B.R. Myers, The Cleanest Race Book TV, he gave about a little over an hour lecture, which summarizes and goes into some detail the book very well. So if you're really interested, you can read it. Now, what he is essentially doing in this book is trying to describe the ideology of North Korea and to dispel what he sees there to be a number of misunderstandings about what their ideology is. Essentially, people very often say that, well, it's a personality cult and it's like Marxist-Leninism or communism or Confucianism. And none of those are really particularly accurate. There are many aspects of the propaganda of North Korea that do not fall into any of those categories. In fact, is rather different from them, and that the basic creed of North Korea is an exceptionally racist one. That Koreans, and it's interesting the way each chapter goes, he talks about what's the North Korean view about South Korea, about the United States, about the biographies of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. And he talks about Kim Jong-un. This book was published just before he came to power, although he was clearly getting groomed for that, and so he does talk about Kim Jong-un, but he has not devoted an entire chapter to it. If he was to write the book today, I think he would, and he talks about how that might be necessary when he came out with this, but it hadn't yet by the time he wrote this. And he summarizes each one. What is the propaganda narrative? So what is the narrative of the biography, what he calls the mythic biography of Kim Jong-il or Kim Il-sung, or the foundation of Korea? Now, the myth of the foundation of Korea is that Korea is this very, very, the purest race on earth. They were founded in 2333 BC on the slopes of Mount Paektu, which before the 20th century was nothing more than the highest point on the Korean peninsula. It has since been declared as like the birthplace of the race of the Korean people, and that the Korean people, they're not. It's different from Nazi racism, whereas Nazi racism believes that the Aryans are superior to everybody else in some physical or mental sense, or more vigorous. The Korean propaganda is that the Koreans are so morally good and innocent that they get taken advantage of by other people. That they need to be protected, that they need to be isolated because they will be taken advantage of by foreigners. And these foreigners could be not just Americans, but Chinese, other Asians, Europeans certainly, Africans, any number of other organizations. And it says my battery's going to die pretty quick here. So, pretty interesting in that regard. he talks about how this ideology actually comes from the Imperial Japanese. The Imperial Japanese colonized Korea, which was xenophobic but not nationalist up to that point, and basically spread the idea that, well, Japanese and Koreans are the same race. They're descended from the same the Yamato race, and they're descended from the same mythological first emperor, who of course came from Mount Fuji. And after the Japanese were kicked out, the North Koreans and the South Koreans, to a lesser extent, just picked up that mythology and they just transposed it. So instead of Mount Fuji, it's Mount Paektu. Instead of the emperor, it becomes Kim Il Sung, or this mythological pre-emperor. And they go from there. So it has lots of pictures, it has a lot of analysis. It makes the point that North Korea actually has a lot of support from the populace in North Korea. About half the people who flee North Korea return to North Korea, and that even though the southern border with South Korea is heavily fortified, the northern border with China is not. So it's not like East Germany where they have to keep people from leaving, because most people don't, and even when they do, they come back. And then the other interesting thing is that things that would be used for propaganda from our perspective aren't. So the United States during the Korean War basically had a carpet bombing, mass bombing of the North, indiscriminately using napalm, killing many, many thousands, if not millions of civilians. And that's not used in the propaganda because part of the mythological biography of Kim Il Sung is that he's this great protector. They need him to protect them. Well, he was completely unable to protect them from the United States, and so they just omit that actual egregious war crime because it doesn't serve the interest of the benevolent dictator protecting them. Koreans on the propaganda are depicted as childlike, needing to be childlike, requiring a paternal figure to take care of them, and that's the justification for the dictatorship. And it's also interesting. They need an enemy. They need somebody to be protected from. So that's why that's why the United States is such a big boogeyman. The other main component of this is that South Korea is just a Yankee colony, that the South Koreans want to be part of North Korea, and that they're just being prevented by doing this by the Americans. And this, of course, doesn't always make a lot of sense because the South engages with the North, and it's hard to see if they were completely under the control of the Americans, why they would be doing this. If the Americans were out there trying to defeat the North Koreans, why they would allow this. It's something that's kind of glossed over, and a contradiction that's not addressed. And the problem that they're going to have is that their information cordon from the rest of the world, which was very, very effective up until recently, is going to make it become increasingly clear that South Koreans don't want to be part of North Korea. And that's something that the propaganda does not allow for. There is a good chance, nobody thinks that North Korea can win a war with the South or with the United States, even if it had a few nuclear weapons. But it may be forced into that position because it needs an external enemy. And when they do their saber rattling, it's not entirely... They may actually do it, is what the author is basically saying. So anyway, I don't want to keep this too long because my battery's going to die. But yeah, excellent book. He talks a little about their official philosophy, Juche, which is, he describes it as something to be admired but not to be studied. It's basically when Kim Il Sung was the dictator, Mao was also the dictator, and Mao was developing this personality cult. Well, Mao was a great poet and a great engineer, and they decided they needed to do the same thing. And so everything that Mao did, they said Kim Il Sung did. So Mao had a famous long march, and so Kim had the arduous march, and Mao was this great intellectual, and so Kim Il Sung invented Juche, which again, he says it's basically book spines to put on a shelf and say, look how smart he is, he wrote all these books, but he didn't write those books. He's attributed to writing all these plays that no one even remembered existed until after Mao became a great playwright and poet, 30, 40 years later. So I don't know, it was very interesting, a quick read, an informative read about a country most people don't know that very much about. And all right, that's it.